Good morning, Judith.
Good morning, Sonya.
Welcome to the Coach's Cup podcast. I am Sonya Green from Sonya Green Coaching.
And I'm Judith Fender. I am a certified life and weight loss coach with the No BS weight loss program.
And today we're having a conversation that started for us during the last podcast when we were talking about burnout. I think we even mentioned stress cycles and completing stress cycles, but we really wanted to dig down and do I guess you'd say a deep dive into completing your stress cycles, because I think it's super useful. And you know what? All these topics that we come up with, for me at least, I'm always doing what's useful for me.
Right. Well, same, right? I mean, that's why we do what we do, Sonya.
I know, exactly.
We love this stuff.
Yeah, we do. And so there was so much material when you started talking about stress cycles. There was so much material that even though I think I knew these things on an intellectual level, really fleshing it out and thinking about it and being able to find ways to apply it was useful. So we thought it would be useful to our dear listeners as well.
Yep. There we go. What is stress, Sonya?
Yeah.
What is emotion?
Yeah. We've been listening to some 70s music to get us in the
mood. we did have a fun pre-gaming for this call. So my brain started thinking about, we were talking about emotion and what we learned, how did we learn to process emotion, or even the whole, I probably for me, the reason this song, so the song we're talking about is Emotion by Samantha Sang with the Bee Gees from 1977.
Yeah.
And so the title of the song is Emotion. And I think the reason that is so embedded in my memory, we didn't talk about emotion in the house, but I do remember this song playing on the radio. And I would be lying if maybe I didn't cry a tear or two over it somewhere in the
with your broken heart.
Yeah. Like, this is what emotion. And we were going back and forth about, well, this is where we conceptually think about emotion. Like we think about this is what it is. But then when we challenged that thought, like, but really we listened to the lyrics of the song, I cry me a river that leads to your ocean.
I love that. I love it. I mean, talk about imagery here. Right. I am all in on that.
Right. So she's feeling her emotion. Yeah. Right. She's got a broken heart and she is crying and she is in her feelings. There's another song. We didn't talk about this one. Got Me in My Feelings by, I think it's Drake. I don't even know.
Oh, I do not know that one.
It's good. Anyway, it's a little bit of a hip hop song. So anyway, all right.
My musical tastes are a little eclectic for what most people think I should be, but I was all with you on the Bee Gees.
Right. Oh yeah.
So, but it's important to talk about, when we talk about completing a stress cycle, the first thing to understand is how emotions work in our bodies. Right. And the point, I think, for me is that I was never taught, and I think I'm not a unicorn here. Most of us were never taught to process emotions that they, hear me here, folks, because this is where I think the real understanding starts. Emotions work in our bodies. They are as physical as they are mental. And we want to leave emotions out in the ether somewhere. They're these things that I can just push out of my head and they'll go away. And that is so not true.
It couldn't be further from the truth. And I'm reminded of, I think I said the sentence on the last podcast where Joe Dispenza asks us to think of, we have two brains, right? We have the prefrontal cortex and we have an emotional, our body is the second brain. Then that's where emotion lives. We are dealing with two units here, if you will, two units. And this one sentence I want to say from the Burnout book The truth is, we are emotional beings who occasionally think.
Yeah.
Boom. I'm like, oh, yes.
I hope that people are hearing that and having the same reaction that we have to that, because I mean, I have a PhD. I have put my life, my whole career into thinking to the cerebral level. I have tried to, especially because I have a weight issue that I've dealt with my whole life. And so I have done everything I can to separate myself, my body from my brain.
Yes. Yes.
And you can't do that.
No. And the thing about it is the more cerebral, if you will, you are, and then you feel the emotion. And if you don't know what to do with it, then you're afraid to feel.
Yeah.
How many clients have we coached have said, but I'm afraid to feel?
Yeah.
It has taken me a long time to understand that on an intellectual level. And now I get it.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're so unfamiliar with the process of feeling a feeling. They don't know what to do with it.
And they're afraid if they give into that feeling, because it's so unfamiliar, they're just going to get lost in it. It's
go like, cry a river.
Cry me a river that leads to your ocean, and I'm going to drown in that ocean. But I have had a client, one of my very first clients, and she said, I'm afraid I'm going to go over the cliff. Yeah. And I won't be able to get back.
You're right. Right.
And that's that is real, folks. It's not to be taken lightly. People feel that way.
They do. That perception. I'm reminded again of the book from the Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking Stress by the Nagoski sisters, where they talk about the emotion being a tunnel, right? And the process of feeling an emotion is like going through the tunnel.
Yes.
And you knowing that to get through it, and there will be light at the end. Although there's a coach in me that doesn't like this analogy, but I do like it for the process of an emotion, and where people feel stuck emotionally, they're in that tunnel. Yeah. So even if you thought of it at the end, people would perceive that the end of the tunnel would be a cliff that they would fall out on, not bright sunlight and green grass and moving on.
Right. Yeah. And I think when I think about this, when we get stuck in that tunnel, that's when the fact that emotions are in our bodies becomes real, because it has physical implications. Inflammation in our body comes from it doesn't just, I'm not saying that every instance is this way, but being stuck in our emotions causes inflammation in our body, which leads to disease. How many times have you been in a stressful situation and then you get really sick?
Yes. I don't want to count.
I had it happen when I was working on my master's degree. I was, I can look back now and see a lot of different factors that I didn't even understand were going on at the time. I was living on my own for the very first time. I didn't have roommates like I'd had in college.
Stress.
I had gone through
counting with my fingers.
A master's program in itself, the graduate program, trying to live into my potential and feeling that imposter syndrome. There had been some stress going on in my parents' marriage. They, about 4 or 5 years later, they would divorce. But there was some stress that I was trying not to know was going on. I was ignoring to just fighting that feeling that my family was crumbling, and I was trying to ignore that. I went through a bad breakup, which I think was exacerbated by the previous experiences.
And you didn't cry a river over it.
I didn't cry a river. I was strong. I was the strong one.
Right. That's right. You had to keep it pulled together.
Yeah. And then at the end of my second semester in the master's program, I ended up in the hospital for 12 days. They didn't know. It took them a long time to figure out what was wrong with me. And it turns out I had mono. But for a long time, it was touch and go. I was spiking fevers, and it was pretty scary for everybody else, I was so sick. I was too sick to be scared. I was ready. I was like, I just want to die. I mean, I was in pain. But looking back now, I see how many different things I had let pile up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it led to a physical demise. It doesn't always get that bad, but sometimes it gets worse, right?
Right. Well, I'm curious, what was the time frame on this? Was this like within a year period or 2-year period? If you had to like summarize.
Well, all of those things that I was telling you about had been happening probably just within the year. Within the year itself.
Yeah. Because we didn't talk about it. And if it's mentioned in the book, well, it just does. It comes back to like this, when we keep adding the stressors and the stress cycle just keeps packing in that tunnel, if you will. You're just jamming it in there.
It's like being constipated.
I know. Well, that's funny. Ironically enough, that's one of the symptoms of stress is constipation.
Well,
right?
that's what. Yeah, my husband will appreciate me telling this to our international audience. But when I said this morning, I said to him, we're talking about emotion and how it actually lives in our bodies. And if we don't get rid of it, if we don't move through it, it can cause a physical problem. And he goes, yeah, I have IBS.
Yep.
And I was like, oh yeah, I guess you do know that. When he gets stressed, then that is one of the very common problems that not completing the stress cycle causes.
I'm sorry, I just had another thought here. I'm going off on another song.
About IBS.
Emotional rescue. Who sang that? Was that Mick Jagger?
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's hilarious.
Like, that's what you needed right then. Like, we needed emotional rescue. If we thought of our feelings as like 911, let's tend to the body, let's tend to this emotion right now. Right now.
And that's why we have physical reactions. That's why we get sick, because our body's like, hey, folks, you're not listening to me. We're going to have some downtime now.
Yeah. Hello. There you were, 12 days in the hospital.
Yeah. And even longer after that, I was on my back for about 3 months.
Oh, Sonya.
The summer. Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was, it wasn't as bad for me. Honestly, it was more scary for my mother and my father, I'm sure. But, she was there in the hospital with me the whole time. I was honestly so sick that I didn't care.
Wow.
But for her, it was a really scary time.
Yeah. Sorry.
But that's the beauty of learning these things and sharing them with people now.
It is. And even after knowing you, knowing you this long and as much podcasting as we have done, if you've told me this story, I don't remember it, but I
probably haven't.
And, and it's so funny, even like when you tell me and we talk about emotions and how you are learning this and stepping into it, I think to myself, I don't want to say I downplay it, but I'm like, no. But I'm like, wow, that is really, really deep.
No, when I say that I was disassociated from my emotions, I mean that in the truest sense. Emotions were my enemy, because if you have an emotion, that means you're weak. And that was, nobody ever took me aside and said, if you have an emotion, you're weak, get over it. But that was the message.
Oh, yeah. We've talked to.
Yeah. That was the message that I internalized. And I want, as a perfectionist, I wanted to show that I learned that lesson.
I got the same message. I mean, the words were from my dad. Don't come to me crying.
Yeah.
Don't come to me crying. Like, well, that's when do you need people the most?
Yes.
Like they talk about the human giver and the human being syndrome.
Yeah.
The cure, the remedy, the writing effect on this, writing with an R, is, human connection, the hug, the bonding, turning to your people.
Yeah.
But I wanted to come I feel like I'm going all over the place, because when you said disassociation, I'm curious to think about this like in terms of dysregulation. Like, when does it become a dysregulation of emotion, when you don't deal with the intensity of an emotion?
Talk about that. Talk about the difference between disassociation and regulation.
This is going to be how I'm going to interpret it, based on, loosely on what my understanding. So disconnection would be like you were talking about, up in your head, up in your thoughts about it, and not processing the emotion. Dysregulation would be where you're in the state, like I think of anxiety, where I considered myself emotionally dysregulated from the intensity of the feeling. Like I was, my heart racing, pounding, but I could be very calm and go to a seminar for 6 days and never miss a beat.
Yeah.
But emotionally dysregulated. My body, my system was on complete overhaul and not sleeping. And
yeah, no, so I got sick the first time at Christmas of that year. I got strep throat, and I took, antibiotics, did the things. And then I went back and I kept having low grade fevers, and I would pop Tylenol. I actually gave myself a nice case of hepatitis, the kind that you get from taking too much Tylenol, and it messes with your liver.
I did not. I knew that's what that you could get.
Yeah, I was a beautiful shade of orange when I was in the hospital.
What? That's crap. I'm like, this cannot be underrated. I'm all about some liver health. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, I took, starting in January when I went back to school, I was teaching because I was in a master's program. I was a graduate teaching assistant, and I was teaching and taking classes. And so I had to feel good. I had to get a class. So I popped Tylenol. I don't know how often, but enough that anytime I was feeling bad with one of these low grade fevers, I would take Tylenol. So it's fair to say daily, definitely several times a week, if not every day. And I kept going. Did anybody notice that I wasn't feeling good? Because I didn't let them. So that's what you're talking about with dysregulation, I think, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be to that extreme, but
I think there's, dysregulation could also be like just the knowing that the nervous system, when I think of anxiety, it's that vibration, like your system was probably more on that. What did they call that? Systems of wellness, and a system of distress and system of wellness.
Yeah.
You would have been in the system of distress.
Yeah.
But anxiety, the resurface of it, and that dysregulation of your nervous system, I'm thinking is more along the lines of where we talk about like trauma and carrying old emotion that comes, that's triggered in the current state.
Yeah.
A body. That sounds like I'm talking all over. I know.
No. I understand what you're saying. In fact, we were talking about how, trauma is, earlier we were talking about trauma. Part of trauma is not completing the stress cycle.
Right. Too much, too soon.
Yes.
Too much, too soon. And you just literally, like people witnessing car accidents, 9/11, parental separation or conversations as children. It gets interpreted, in a heightened sense, and it happens so fast. And then all of a sudden we have to return to normal.
Yeah.
Without the proper, like shootings in school, and why they have trauma response teams coming to help them process the emotion.
Yeah. So it's important to point out right now to our listeners, I think, that completing stress cycles, many times people think if I get rid of the stressor, then I will complete the cycle automatically. That is not the case. And that's where we can put it back into model language.
Yes.
I think if we change our circumstance, then we can change our feeling. And guess what?
I'm still going to argue for that one.
Yeah.
There are some things when you are in a lot of stress, like taking a load on, getting a vacation.
Yes.
Taking some work off there.
Okay. We'll argue about this for just a minute. So in a situation like that, I would say that it's still, I can come back from a vacation and not be rested, depending on what my thoughts are about it, about the situation.
Okay. I'll give you that. I guess I am thinking more about like the benefit I
Oh,
experienced when I had,
absolutely.
like, I couldn't process the stress
Yeah.
while the stressors were still available to me.
Right.
But once I got some stressors off my plate, some
Yes.
circumstances, I
Yeah.
could spend some time with myself, reconnect, regulate my system back,
Absolutely.
feel my feelings,
Yeah. Yeah.
cry a river.
But it's, you can think when sometimes the stressor is going to stay. And it's important to remember that you can complete a stress cycle every day if you need to. Like if it's your
Yes.
job or if it's a person you're working with, you can complete a stress cycle every day and repeat that and stay. That stressor remains the same, but you have power over your stress. And that's what I think is important for people to understand. You have power over your stress. You can make sure you complete a stress cycle.
Right. Creating that wellness cycle for
Yes.
yourself. So this is where we would talk about, again, physical activity, number one.
Yeah. There's seven ways to complete a stress cycle. So once you're in it, and number one is physical activity.
Again, like thinking back to my own experience this summer where I was literally, the PT said, no exercise for you. 1 month, no soup for you. And then just the combined inactivity with work stress, life stress. My mother had just passed away, just my own stress of wanting to do a good job and all the things. The number one thing I think that impacted me the most was taking away my physical activity. And I could literally, looking back, feel it happening every day, combining upon itself and not having that as my outlet.
And this is physical activity is probably the most common way. It's certainly the way that in the animal kingdom that they get rid of stress.
Right.
If you think that humans are the only ones with stress, excuse me, if you think humans are the only ones with stress, you're wrong. Animals have it all the time. When the gazelle gets chased by the lion, there is stress. But if you've watched animals, when they complete a stress cycle, when something happens and then they survive it, like if you've ever seen a squirrel that gets picked up by a hawk and then they manage to get away, at the end of that cycle, they will like shake. They'll
shake it off.
They will literally, there'll be this kind of physical reaction that happens in their nervous system, where they shake it off.
So I don't know if I'm sure you did hear this in one of the interviews we listened to of the Nagoski sisters, where they talked about, how do you know when you've completed a stress cycle? And she says that some people, it's like knowing whether you're full or you know when you're full, and when you've had an orgasm. That some people can just identify. And I'm going to tell you, that's what I feel about my exercise. I can look back when I heard that, I was like, I didn't imagine it. Exercise mentally, it took about 4 days before the accumulated stress was released and I got to a place, back to that calm place. And then after I would exercise, like, it felt as complete. It didn't feel like, but it felt as complete as knowing that I was back in emotional regulation. I'm going to use that word.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because another thing I think it's important for us to explain is that sometimes you're doing things to siphon off the level of stress, to get it back down to where it's manageable, but you may not be complete with the cycle yet. So it took you said about 4 days. It doesn't mean once you start doing it regularly, then if it's your
Right.
job, you can go for a run or a walk at the end of the day
Exactly.
and complete that cycle. But if you let it build up,
Yes.
then it's going to take several days to
Yes.
get rid of all of it.
Yes. I think I was probably 2 weeks into the PT telling me not to exercise, that I was like begging my boss, like, I need a week off. I don't know what's going on. And when
Isn't
in the
that
moments,
funny?
in the moments, I couldn't tell you what was going on, except emotionally. The biggest thing I was aware of is that I was cognitively impaired. I could not function at a level that I was accustomed to.
Yes.
And I want to emphasize that, because like you're sharing your story, I think it can't go underrated about what stress does to our brains and not completing that cycle, and how real it was.
Yeah.
It was just as real as you and I sitting right here having this conversation.
Yes, it affects our bodies. And guess what? Our brains are in our bodies. It has a full head to toe effect on us.
Yes.
Because it's connected to our nervous system, and our nervous system runs from our brains to our toes, out our fingers, all of it.
Yep.
So it affects all areas cognitively, and our emotions. In fact, I want to move on so we can get through all 7 of these. But another way to move through it, and I think this is really helpful, especially for siphoning off, and it depends on the level of stress you're in, is breathing.
100%. Right.
How many of us, I know I am a non-breather. Like, I will be in a situation and realize I haven't taken a breath, not a deep breath. It'll be very shallow.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to talk about me, but you go.
No.
I was with anxiety. That is one of the key first things you learn, is because anxiety is telling you you're in the flight or fight response, right? You're feeling this emotion. And so when we tap into the breathing and we do whether it's the circular breathing, the 4 square breathing, there's a system breathing, the Hoff REM reflex breathing, like you Google breathing exercises, you're going to find a ton of them.
Yeah.
And they are effective because it helps create emotional regulation. It gets you back out of your thoughts, right? Coming back to that one sentence, we are emotional beings that occasionally think. So when we are in emotion, when we are in our head too much and we're not in our body, we're not breathing.
Yeah.
When we come back to the body is the safe space. Somewhere that word safety kept coming up, and I wanted to be sure to emphasize. A lot of clients that I will coach will say, it doesn't feel safe. They don't feel safe. And that's understanding of the body. When we connect back to the body, it is safe, but it's not going to feel safe if you're feeling anxious or afraid to feel your feelings.
Right.
Okay. I'm just jibber jabber. Woo.
No. That I love that. It's impossible to stress how important that is. And if you are somebody who is not in tune with your breathing, like you said, you can Google lots of ways. I like my Fitbit because it has the little 2-minute breathing app on it that tells me exactly when to inhale and exhale. And I can do that 2 minutes out of my day. It's not that big a deal. Yeah. Takes no time. It's a lot better than scrolling on my phone. Hear me, folks?
Oh boy. Those phones. We need to do a podcast on that.
Oh my goodness. But it can get you back and siphon off that stress and help you complete the stress cycle. So don't underestimate the power of breathing. It's what meditation, yoga, all of those practices help you focus on your breathing.
Yep.
So the third is positive social interaction.
Best thing ever.
Love it.
Calling your friend.
Some of that right now, aren't we?
Yep. Calling your friend. Talking about your feelings. What's going on? Connection.
And you know what? I'm just going to tie that one to number 4, because number 4 is uncontrolled laughter, which is my favorite.
What did you you texted me that somewhere about laughter? Did I imagine that?
I don't know. Did I? Probably. We were at a family thing, yesterday, and one of my cousins, she said, "You have the best laugh. I just love your laugh." And I said, "Well, that's good because I love to use it." I love to laugh. And humor, I've said before, humor is one of my values. For me, laughter is so important.
I'm scrolling through the phone right now. I know I didn't imagine that somewhere you said laughter was your favorite thing, or maybe it was, because we were talking about this last night, connecting on what we were going to do. And, but I'm with you. Laughter is good. And I think this helps lead into the number 5, the physical affection. This is what I think of. And I'll say to my clients, and I'm relying on my intuition here. This just when oftentimes I will get a client and I can feel their energy that they bring. Mm-hmm. And I think of I tell them, I'm like, you're the racehorse and I'm the pace horse, right? Because I can feel their emotional dysregulation is what I'm going to call it now. Clinically, I don't know what I'm saying, but it's what I relate to
as a coach,
right? So I think of myself as, I am the hug. I am the 20-second hug when they come to me, a safe place where they can express themselves. Although we are talking about a physical hug to emotionally regulate to someone else's nervous system. It gets you into reset. It gets you out of your thinking. You stand and support your own body weight as you connect and touch someone.
Yeah. My daughter, this is absolutely essential for her. I don't know that she has ever connected it to completing a stress cycle, but and I'm the same way. There are times when I will tell my husband, I just need a hug right now. I need you to hug me. And my daughter's the same way. And that changes everything.
Yes.
And it changes everything in your nervous system.
It's like a reset.
Yes, we think it's just doing some kind of emotional thing. It is doing a physical thing. It's ending that stress cycle for us that maybe we couldn't even name.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed. Your favorite, or we were talking about crying a river, number 6.
Crying a river that leads to your ocean. Yeah, those are some tears. And that's one, I would say that's probably the one people like the least.
I would say as a coach, it's
probably as a culture, we like it the least.
Oh yeah. And even as on some clients, because it's so personal, it's raw and vulnerable.
Yes.
It's and it's something you were talking about when people that shaking response. Sometimes I think when I'm coaching people and you can see emotion come up, especially if it's an old one they haven't shared, not like a trauma emotion, but like just an old one that keeps resurfacing and they talk to no one else about it except your coach, and the tears and the physicalness and how, and they'll say, I don't know why I'm crying.
Oh my goodness. I've had so many clients who will say that. I don't even understand why I'm crying right now. And it's okay. We're just going to go with it. We are cleansing here.
100%. We're just going to feel this feeling. We're top of the head. We're going to start a body scan. What are you feeling? Yeah.
And when you process it through, what are we taught? We talked about this. Let's tie this back to the beginning. We are taught as children, don't you come to me crying. My dad's saying was, if you don't quit crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about.
That one too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your dad and my dad grew up together.
They did. They grew up in the same time. I'm absolutely sure.
That's right.
Yeah. So we are taught that crying is this show of weakness. It is unnecessary. It is excessive. We could get into the whole, and I would say patriarchal issue, but the sad thing is that boys are taught even more than girls are, that it is not acceptable to cry.
That is the huge reflection right there when we think about our dads. This is what they knew. They didn't know what to do with that emotion.
No,
they didn't know. Like, what? Don't come to me crying.
No, I don't blame my dad for that.
No,
and because it's just what they were taught, right? But crying is one of the ways that we complete a stress cycle. So think about if you need to cry and you're not allowed to, you're just packing that tunnel even tighter.
Yep. That's right there. Exhaustion happens when we get stuck in the tunnel.
Yeah. And then sometimes it comes out and we don't know why it's there.
Mm-hmm.
But we just have to trust it, especially if you're with your coach, if you're with a friend. I mean, no matter when it is, we just have to trust this is what I need to do. And when you start doing that body scan you were talking about, what do they do then?
Oh, well, different people, that's a real lesson of trust, I think, and vulnerability. It says a lot when you're with an experienced coach who will take you right into a body scan. Because if the coach hesitates, then the client can hesitate too.
Yes.
And there's nothing like, in my thoughts, of being with someone who can be there for you right there in that moment when you need that moment to feel your feeling.
But generally, once you start scanning, how long do they cry after that?
It's not even, I would go under a minute, 30 seconds tops. Yes. And then they're like confused, like, what happened?
Why? And it's just because you have completed the cycle.
Yes.
That's the funny part.
It off.
Yes. You don't fall off a cliff. You move through it and you move on.
Yeah.
And because it's a cycle, it's not linear. So it doesn't have a distinct beginning and end necessarily. It's a cycle. Later on, you may feel like you need to cry or laugh or have a hug or something like that again.
I feel like I have to say this right here. How many clients, I mean, we hear it over and over and over. I feel like I'm on a hamster wheel, right? It's the being caught up in your thoughts and not feeling the emotion. And you are just cycling and cycling and cycling. And well, in the sense of, does that even work as I say that? Like the circularness of it is, to get off the hamster wheel is to feel the emotion, to complete it, flatten it out, like Brooke said.
Yes.
Let's flatten this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true. But I think understanding that it's a cycle that we may have to go through again, especially something like if it's grief.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it once and it be gone. With a stressor, like if your job is your stressor or your boss is your stressor, you may complete the cycle daily. So,
well, I mean, what if we just concluded that as part of our hygiene, right? Our daily hygiene.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Like brushing our teeth.
Yes. If it's the car ride, using that as your decompression time, or where you can complete cycles or talk to yourself or cry or turn on some funny, I was going to say CDs, but I think I'm dating myself if I said that. Or, like
listen to a podcast.
Listen to a podcast. Yeah. We're funny. Come laugh with us. We cry rivers.
Yep.
But including feeling your feelings, just taking time for yourself on the daily.
Yes. Oh, that is so important. Listen, folks, I have been known to write it on my calendar. I schedule time. Now, there are times when you need it and you need it and it's not scheduled because maybe it's an unexpected stressor that has happened that you need to complete a cycle. But I have decompression time, thought time, journal time in there every day. And that leads us to number 7, which is creative expression.
There you go. So writing the songs, singing the songs, pen and paper, art, photography, whatever gets you connected.
Having a dance party in your living room or in the car. I have been known to put on my sunglasses where people won't recognize me and sing to the top of my lungs in the car.
I miss car rides. I need a car ride. Well, but I do that. So I have a little convertible, right? I have a little Volkswagen Bug. My husband and kids got me back in 2004, I think it was. It's still so cute. But I'll go for a ride with the top down, and I'll just think to myself, like, if I can't go I don't have time for a hike or whatever, I'm like, I'm just going to go for a ride. Just gonna go for a ride. Turn the music up and the wind in my hair and going on the parkway. It came to I'm going to do that today.
Yeah. it's any kind of creative expression. People do painting, they do, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but you have to release the stress that's in your body. It is a poison if you don't.
Word. Dating myself again, 1980, 88.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say there. So completing the stress cycle, do it, make time for it, understand that it is as physical as getting a cold. And if you don't get rid of it, sister, you might just get a cold or the flu or cancer or,
Right.
I don't want to be morbid, but it is imperative that
the science is there. There's undisputable.
Yes. Yeah.
The science is there. And I was thinking, again, coming back to our music metaphors and stuff, that it's like the cycles are like records and they're going to play over and over too.
Mm-hmm.
You may do the same one, have the same issues. It's going to be the same stressors, the same stress, and just run it through and
every day
process the emotion every day. Samantha sang in the Bee Gees.
Yeah.
That was going to be our call to action. I know you haven't said goodbye yet, but I wanted to be sure and get that in. Your call to action is to go play emotion.
I love it. I love it. And that song's going to be in my head. And I'm okay with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah. It's
totally fine with that.
That's actually the note I sing in. I don't know if y'all know this about me, but I have often said the reason I love the Bee Gees is because I know the word to every song. And that's my range right there. It's not really singing. It's kind of whisper singing. I don't know.
No, I love the Bee Gees. I am a girl of that age too. All right. Well, folks, if you are looking for a coach, somebody to help you work through your emotions, to figure out how they work in your life, you can find me at sonyagreencoaching.com.
And you can find me at the No BS weight loss program, or searching Corinne Crabtree losing 100 pounds.
We would also love it if you would take just a minute to give us a quick review if you love this podcast as much as we do, if that's even possible. Or even better, share it with a friend.
100%. Yeah. Like, get into that community. Maybe you know someone who needs to hear this message, or you just want them to develop their awareness around emotion and completing stress cycles.
Because this is a great way to wrap it up. And I had forgotten about this, but you just triggered this in me. The real way to complete stress cycles and experience true wellness as a race, as a society, is not self-care. It's caring for each other.
100%.
That's a point that the Nagoski sisters, they're twins. And so I think a lot of their message comes from, I don't even know if they've explored that, but I kept thinking their focus on community has to be in part because of that twinship they share.
Right. Yeah.
But we all share that, so.
Well, I mean, that's
podcast with a friend.
Right. And that's what the coaching, that's why we do what we do, because we want to share with the community and hopes to help everyone have the best life possible.
Yes, absolutely. That, nothing makes me feel more satisfied and like I'm doing the work I need to be doing.
Same. Yeah. Feels very purpose that plays into a lot of the reasons why we do things, is finding that purpose. And that can be very helpful too, as you are thinking about your stressors.
Yep, absolutely.
Does it align with my values? That's going to be another podcast. I found some more stuff.
We got to go, but man, we could keep going for another hour. All right, folks, we'll see you next week.
Bye.